Almost everyone can enjoy reading, but schools destroy that capability fast. Alright, so this is mostly elementary school focused, but it also applies to high schools. Essentially, reading is great for everyone, so many benefits, but the education system discourages developing a healthy relationship with reading. If you're not reading what your teachers want, you aren't allowed. School doesn't give you time to read, and systems such as AR points get rid of the intrinsic value of reading, and cause binge reading to be encouraged instead of allowing you to read just enough each day. All grade levels should be given independent reading time each day, and students should be able to read whatever they want within reason. Obviously there has to be some content restrictions, but if a kid would rather read a self-help book instead of The Great Gatsby, let them. I agree sometimes real shit is hella interesting, but a lot of people read stuff to forget about the real world. So my school, public, USA, had 30 minutes of reading time every day, which was awesome. However, teachers kept track of the number of books people read, so people picked short books. Also, people felt forced to finish books once they committed to them, sunk cost fallacy. It was a good attempt though, and I know very unique especially for public schools. Schools seem to think that ramming To Kill a Mockingbird and Shakespeare down the throats of 14-year-olds will make them enjoy reading. I wish there was more of a variety of books, or that you could bring a books from home. People start to not like reading based on a couple of bad books and never read again. So our German lessons nearly completely destroyed everyone's will to read. It was a book with around 100 pages, but it was the biggest pain ever to read. And the worst part is that I'll have to read it again next year because I'm redoing class. I can agree to quite a personal level, but not just school, at home as well. When I was 5-7-ish, I remember always wanting to read nonfiction books like encyclopedias and history books. This was always discouraged by teachers and parents, and it was always preferred I was reading fiction books all the time that I didn't want to read because they weren't real. Nowadays, 20 years or so later, I barely ever pick up a book. I've read a few books but never really got on well with fiction in general. I used to love to read. I read voraciously until 6th grade. It took one teacher to take my love for reading, rip it from my hands, and dash it against the rocks with a twisted grin on her face. The class was called Read a Latte, and I thought, oh shit, this is going to be a breeze, I'll be able to read all I want and write about it a little. Boy, I was so wrong. The teacher was MRS. M, although we called her MRS. Mental, the mentally deranged clown from outer space. She was originally a kindergarten teacher, and for some reason, money, she decided to move to teacher 6th grade reading. To put in context how bad she was, the first book as when she read the Aminal. I had it read in 5th grade as an exercise in visualization and interpretation. I knew it was a turtle, and I drew one. She was baffled, almost upset that I knew, and she said, "That's strange because nobody uses this book." We also read The View from Saturday, but she had effectively censored the book by taping construction paper over sections of it. She would then have us read like a paragraph or maybe a page, and spend 40 minutes writing several pages about it. And it was only this one book. Now, a lot of people have said that the book was good, but the experience drained any experience that I could possibly derive from it. It took me 8 years to regain that love of reading, and I have contemplated writing her a fuck you letter. Fuck you, MRS. M. Fuck you for taking one of the only things that brought me happiness during a dark time in my life and ruining it. When you grow older, you come back to reading. What kills the enjoyment of reading is the lack of time and the pressure to read what you have no interest in. In high school we were reading some book, I still can't remember what it was called, but for the legit first time in my life I was enjoying a book. I got in trouble when I started reading ahead. After a few chapters in class I had enough and snuck it into my bag, and I got through the entire book in one night, and I was so pleased with myself for doing it. I returned it to class the next day, and when I told the teacher I finished it, well, it resulted in me getting my first suspension, and to this day I still haven't read another book, so take what you will from that story. Agreed. I used to love reading, read tough language books at like 10 and 12. Read War of the Worlds at like 8 or 9. Come school and now I just can't do it. They force us to read these boring ass uninteresting stories, and by the time we're done with them I'm sick of reading and can't read a personal book. It sure would have been nice if I'd been allowed to read books on different cultures instead of having to sift through classic literature like Moby Dick and Tom Sawyer trying to interpret the author's message. I could not possibly give less of a fuck about the subtext and foreshadowing in some fictional bullshit written in an archaic dialect. Most English teachers seem to love the most pretentious Ulysses type of stuff. It's fine if they enjoy that sort of thing on their own time, but it's absurd that they don't seem to understand why their whole class hates it. I used to love reading and could read multiple books a day, but when I got to secondary school my love of reading disappeared. Reading became less of enjoying the story because of what it actually conveyed and more about making stupid observations and clutching at straws or using cliches. Facts. I used to burn through Percy Jackson books in like 12 days when I was in elementary school, but guided reading made me hate reading altogether. If I'm forced to read something I don't find interesting, then it'll make me hate it. Both me and my mother absolutely love to read, but my dad has always disliked it. When I finally asked him why, he cited a beginner English course he took in his freshman year of college. He explained to me that the professor made them read The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, which is a notoriously difficult book to get through. I'm a creative writing major, and I almost read the book myself. It was only called off because my professor told us that it would be even harder now that classes weren't in person. He hated every single second of it because the story made almost no sense to him. He told me that he stayed up late reading it, trying his absolute hardest to understand the story for class. And every time he got back to the class, the professor would start explaining it and it would be nothing that he thought it was. He told me that he hasn't read a book since then. Thinking about it even now, I still feel so upset that some stupid class and inept professor ruined reading for my dad forever.